Okay. So when the topic comes up about race, about racism, about privilege, and who we are as people, it's important to me that I let you know your school system won't do a great job of teaching you these things. These are topics that you will need to be invested in and invested in learning. School settings are not always the best places for some of these things. And the simple reason is because not everybody feels comfortable talking about race, privilege, racism as a whole. But what I want to make sure that we understand are just some basic norms for the space today. Even if you are uncomfortable with it or if you're very comfortable with it, this is what I'm expecting of us today as we share in this conversation. First, I want to make sure that everybody is mindful of equity voice. That means that if you're a talker like me, listen. I can talk for 5 minutes or 5 hours on any topic. But when we start talking about these things, I want to make sure that you're mindful of your voice, right? Step back and allow somebody else to step up and voice their opinion. We have with us a plethora of students who represent all different cultures, races, ethnicities, and diasporas. So we also need to make sure that we're respectful of other people's opinions and other people's ideas. Speaking for yourself is what I want to make sure we do as well. Not a single one of us is a representative for our entire race or community. So you can only speak from the seat that you sit in and from your own experiences, right? So we want to avoid blanketing things. One of my blanket things that I like to do, colored people time, CP time, right? But in general, plenty of people of color like and enjoy being early. So I should be speaking from my own point of view and not offering that to everybody. And that's just one example of how that can accidentally or unconsciously occur. Okay. And then also, I want to make sure that everybody is able to accept at the end of this that there may be some non closure. You may open up a can here that doesn't necessarily have a nice tight lid on it. Conversations may end up here being open ended. So that's what I'm expecting you allow to guide your own research. Capiche? Capiche. All right, so today we're going to get through a couple of things. And my hope is in the end that we are able to maybe share out some goal statements in the chat. But if we don't get there, that is something that we can also touch on later on. First, we're going to go through a bit of an icebreaker. It's an activity that some of you may have done or may not have done. And then we're going to take a deep dive into our overview of racism, and something that has been really occurring in the news and media a lot, which is critical race theory. Should we be teaching this to students? So for our privilege activity, I am going to ask that everyone uses the link joinmyquiz.com. And I'm actually going to stop my share and ask Albanese to begin her share. Albanese, you cool with that?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. In the meantime, joinmyquiz.com, and I'm going to drop that in the chat while Albanese shares.
The code is in the screen.
Good. Now you guys can see what we are about to embark on is a quizzes activity. This is something that you typically see happening in person or in-person spaces, but it also can be done very well virtually. So please go to joinmyquiz.com and then type in the code 980095. Albanese, if you want to press the button up top, actually, yep, I was just about to say, and paste it in, that helps too. Okay, and we're looking for the little number of people to go from 0 to roughly about the number of people in the space. I see it climbing. Every single one of us at the very least, right? If you're, yes, staff are too. Thank you very much to Shy for clearing. But remember, I said staff, this one's on me. You are active participants here in the space. So I'm looking for 28 participants so that we can hit the start button. If you're having any issues with it, you've got to drop that in the chat for me. Okay. All right. Waiting on only a couple, about 10 more. Now, while people join, what you're about to take is a quiz on quizzes that actually goes um, with all yes or no questions. With all yes or no questions. So it is a set of yes or no questions that should take you 30 seconds or less to answer. That means that I'm going to give us here about 4 to 5 minutes to get us going. I see a couple of folks still need to join. If you are not able to join, you're going to need to drop that in the chat. If you're like standing at work holding your cell phone and you're like, Miss, I can't join. Okay, drop that in the chat for us so that we know when we get it kicked off. I see we're at 20, but I don't want there to be folks who can't join. If you're having trouble, just let us know before we press the start button. All right. In that case, let's get started with this quiz. I want to see if we can all be wrapped up with it by 11:20. So go ahead and you're going to have about 6 minutes to take these rapid fire yes or no questions, which we'll see progressing on the screen. While you take this quiz, watch your rank and watch how it slides, because you'll actually notice that folks, after answering these questions, will be sliding along this list. Oh, and you can press OK too, Albanese. That's okay about changing your name. You don't want to, you actually want to do this anonymously first, Valeria. So you don't need to change your name. You just need to begin and know which name is yours, right? So we're gonna, again, this is anonymous from us. I don't know which one of you is Dulce Dracula. I have no idea who's Cauliflower Summers. No one does, not even Albanese.
It's sad that I cannot see them move. When I was trying it, I could see myself move when I was doing on my phone, but I can't see it now.
Press
I don't
OK and
know
maybe
why.
we'll see a little difference. The little OK button, you know, that's come up like the little pop-up need a teaching moment. There you go. Okay. I don't know. Hey, sometimes technology can trick us, but is anyone, if you're able to answer questions or any staff are able to click through and answer questions, let me know. Staff, are you able to take the, are we seeing the quiz questions progress? All right, wonderful.
Yes.
Albanese, you can try pressing the refresh button to see if it will shift it around. But that's okay, because in the end, we'll also be able to see our results.
Okay, because when I was trying it, I could see it. Well, now I don't know if I could see
Yeah,
it
right.
now.
It's okay. You can try your refresh button and see where you're at.
If I refresh it, what if it just takes everything away?
Oh, okay, got it. So then don't. Let me see what I can see on my end. All right, why don't you pause your share for a sec and let folks finish wrapping up their quiz. You can stop your share. There we go. Okay. Staff, students, everyone. Again, these shouldn't take you more than 30 seconds or so. All righty. so that you can see how we are actually sliding around on there. Albanese, I was able to show the report so far.
You're able to see it?
Yep.
Okay.
My mom has told me that I could be whatever I want, but she said I can't be a squirrel, and I am upset about that.
Well, now. No, Harmony, you cannot be a squirrel.
Why? I could just put on a squirrel outfit and just be a squirrel.
We haven't gotten there yet, unfortunately. Now, I'm curious, and I think that these folks are going to be very curious as well. Curious to see who lands at the top of this pyramid or so, and who lands there at the bottom. Okay, so make sure, right? Watch where you land. No love for Carambola Caulfield. No love for Raspberry Bloom. Or Gooseberry Grindel. But as we climb, okay now. As we climb.
There's right and wrong answers on this? What?
You'll see. A good number of folks have finished, so fabulous timing. Okay, take another 2 minutes or so to wrap up.
We were graded on this.
Oh, I love it. We were graded on this. Well, were we graded? Not in so many words graded. 53.
It's not a grade per se.
Not graded per se. Sorghum Schnitzel, Ginger Gandalf, y'all still with us? Plantain Prime. All right, Sorghum Schnitzel, I see you down there. Go ahead, Ginger. Plátano, you're going real slow. Going real slow over here, okay? Who's that? We'll find out if they choose to reveal themselves. Because again, this is anonymous and we don't know. A 55. Quite interesting indeed. Okay, so as we travel through, I'm gonna stop my share for a sec. I just want you to take note at this point of your rank. I want you to take a second, take note of where you land with your ranking right now. Okay, no need to announce it just yet, but look at your name. Look at where you are landing with your ranking. And then I do want to hit the end button, but not until folks who are still going go. But take note and take stock of where you're landing. Yeah, me too. Me too. I'm all 48. Gotcha. Okay. All right. Other folks, please go ahead. If you've completed it at this point, feel free. Drop your numbers into your chat. Students, if you want to drop them in, I see a few folks dropping them in. Go ahead, drop them in. Gotcha. It's real out here, isn't it? I'm getting a couple of DMs on it as well. Yeah. So while we listen to the sweet melodies of quizzes, I don't know where they got this little music from, but it's great. I love it. While we listen to those tunes and you continue jamming to them in the background, we're going to continue to progress through and dissect this. I will hit the end button when I know that people who are nearing have finished, and I'm going to go back to my slides so that we can get through a bit of conversation. Okay. See a couple of folks wrapping it. A couple minutes pass, right? But we're going to try and keep still within that time frame. And if we possibly ride right until the 11:55 mark, I think we should still be okay to get to our next places on time. It's something that you can do quite quickly, but some questions can often give you a bit of pause. In fact, I'll take a second to show you guys which questions in a moment gave us the most pause, which ones folks seem to need a second at a bit longer to really think about. In the meantime, where's my presentation? Okay, here we go. Okay, so again, remember the norms, be mindful, right? You don't need to share or be the only person sharing, and be respectful as we kind of dive into dissecting what we just did, which is really called a privilege walk. You see, if we did this in person, what would have happened would be that folks would be timed and allowed to begin and compete in a race. But depending on what they answered yes or no to, may end up needing to, instead of moving forward in this race, slide backward. So I just want to take some time to consciously reflect. And I'd like to know if there are people who scored low on this, right? And if you can share out, what are your initial feelings on being on the back of the line or at the bottom of the list in that sense? Anyone who landed really low at the bottom, I saw people who said mine was 25, 30, 38. 40, folks who did not pass, right? Didn't make it to that 65 mark. Would you care to share what you feel about being on that end of the line?
Can you guys hear me? Yes, can you hear me? Okay, I was gonna say for me, I didn't realize like some of the questions, I didn't realize like, dang, I I thought like I had access to like I thought I didn't have it as bad as like other people, but the percentage I got now I'm thinking like these experiences, I never like, you know, when you experience something, but you don't realize like it's bad until like these questions made me realize I kind of push these things to the back of my head. And I feel like I've been smooth sailing, but actually not. Like the question about has anyone ever spoken for me, like when you take too long to get your words out or something like that, that one I experience all the time because sometimes my thought, like even right now, sometimes it's hard for me to articulate my words like clearly and in a fast manner. So I've had experiences in classes or like with professors who try to speak or act like they know what I was about to say in a discussion. And that really irritates me because it's like, don't do that. Just give me a chance to say what I have to say. Or even the question about like, can I make a mistake without being like ridiculed for it? That is also something I can't do as a person of color, especially as a woman, because I feel like in some workplaces, men always try to belittle women. And yeah, being a person of color, it's like they sort of make it seem like it's your fault, like directly your fault for the mistakes that you make.
You're muted.
Hallelujah. I try to get through every Zoom meeting without being told I'm muted, but today I got tried. I just want to read out. It made sense from Shantavia. She said, it made sense that the lower your percentage equates with how much privilege you have. Shantavia picked up on it. You're absolutely right. This privilege score, or this percentage score, is really a score of privilege, of your perceived privilege in this particular country which we live in. Now, you have to understand that were we living in a different country with different cultural norms and different societal structures, then these might not be what makes someone privileged or unprivileged. However, in America, this is what we face and what we look at and what we should be understanding about where we stand with our privilege. Would anybody like to share on any of the other questions? If there were any things that surprised them, Jalen, I'll read out. She said, not surprised, honestly. If anyone were surprised, please share. And if there were any sentences or any questions that were very impactful for you, I'd also like to give a chance for people to shout out which were the questions that were like, whoa. Okay. Any surprises and any questions that you were surprised about?
You can hear me, yes?
Yes, sir.
So basically, I don't know what the questions were, but basically, I was a bit stunned by this question about the media, how it portrays like the person I am, like as like the weird kid stereotype, as in like people say.
Wait, you cut us at the weird kid stereotype. I think I know where Prosper is going though. I too, weird kids unite. Weird kids unite. Okay. Anybody else understand that part? Blurs, black nerds, right? Come on. We out there, right? We're out there. Okay. I understand. I think Prosper, though, you cut off a bit. If you want to maybe try typing in the chat. But that question was you're good. You're back. You said that question about how you're perceived in the media shocked you?
Right, because yeah, I view myself as the weird kid, and people be like, "Be yourself," and then like I apply that, and then people would say, "Oh, you're the weird kid of the group," and it's like, well, aren't we all weird? Yeah, and then people be in the media, people apply the characters as weird, and then that's how they excuse their actions. Oddly enough, being the weird person, as a weird person myself, I understand that I'm not immune to criticism of my actions, and in fact, I want to be normal and yet weird. It's just a hard thing to implement in media. So that's the question. From That was the question that stunned me.
Gotcha.
That's not crazy enough. That's not crazy.
Got you. Okay. Anybody else have any other things that they'd like to share out?
Mine is question 36. It says, have you ever been asked to speak on behalf of a group who share the same identity as you? I go to a PWI, so I'm very outspoken. I sit in the front and I let like the professors and everything know like when something is not working or something like that. So a lot of the time the students, they will come to me even if they're not black or if they're white, like they would still come to me and have me speak for them. So when it comes to like people that look like me, they want me to speak for them. I do it just because, you know, sometimes they don't have the voice, but then it can be used as in a bad way, I guess, because you want to help them get their voice. You don't want to be like the only voice for them. Because if I'm not there, then who will else speak for them? They won't have anyone else. So I guess it's a learning lesson to actually teach people to speak up for themselves. And if they don't like to, I don't know. I guess you don't gotta push them to, but yeah.
Nice. I circled your question just so people could also see it. That was question 36. Have you ever been asked to speak on behalf of a group of people, right? Go represent all the Black people in this room and make us look good while you're at it. Don't make us look bad. Can be a lot. I thank you guys for sharing these thoughts. Absolutely awesome. Okay, I want to continue with this conversation now that we have a bit of a handle on it. And I hope that folks are thinking and really marinating on their experience so far. Were there any folks who were at the front of the line and would like to share their experiences and how it might feel to be on the front of this line? Front really would be, right, folks who were in that over the 65 range. If your score was a passing score or above. Take a second. I'm thinking again, Prosper spoke, but other folks who shared their score, anybody else over it? Okay. And then we also see our leaderboard. And so we know that in the end, there's a person who is perhaps most privileged among us. It doesn't necessarily turn out to be who we all think it is, but it can be. In doing so, in talking through this, there are a lot of surprises that may come up. There are a lot of things that, you know, we question when we see these. Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Feeling just a bit more privileged. And then two, if you're in a room full of people who are not scoring anywhere near you, then the feeling to be the person to say, yeah, that was me with the 99 can be extremely awkward. But I want to continue on a path that helps us to understand, how do we embrace all of these things? How do we embrace all of this? And so for me, this conversation really begins with giving you guys some solid definitions on race, racism, ethnicity for you to take and to go forward with. So I'm expecting you guys, feel free, unmute, drop in the chat where your thoughts are and if you have any questions. But first, I always like to begin this conversation by defining race. Race includes the socially constructed belief that the human race can be divided into biologically discrete and exclusive groups based on physical and cultural traits, both on the physical traits as well as cultural. When we say that race is a social construct, we are literally saying that race is something that we as a people made up. And we've been making and remaking races for a very long time. If you take a look down the road of history, you'll find some races that used to exist in the 1400s, 1500s, and 1600s no longer even exist as listed anymore. When we began to see colonialism and invasions of the United States and South America through explorers like Columbus, they came, they made children, and they labeled their own children as other races than their own. So we initially began the concept and the social construction of race with several races, many, sometimes as many as 15. Because you could be identified as a different race if you were mixed with European blood and Native American blood, or if you were mixed with African blood and Native American blood, or European, African, and Native American blood, depending on how those things were constructed and what society was really and truly experiencing at those times. But it is something that when we look at science, many scientists have removed race as a classification in their study because we find that only 5 to 6 of our actual differences in our DNA can actually be considered racial differences. And the further truth on this about what we're making up is that skin color, hair texture, lip size, nostril size, skull size, all of these things, body shape, body type, are really and truly more based on where your ancestors lived geographically than any other thing you can imagine. We often see that people within the Asian community have eyes that are shaped differently than the rest of ours. And yet Aborigines, dark-skinned Aboriginal people also reflect and have similar eye shapes. Across regions of Africa, there are African nations who also reflect similar eye shapes. Why? Because eye shape is really and was really simply a thing that was determined by our geography. The wind in our environments made our bodies adapt. People whose ancestors were in windy environments, such as those across Asia and the Asian landscape, naturally adapted and began to look slightly different than the rest of us. Similarly to our melanin Black folks, right? It's merely a protective device to the sun that we were experiencing a whole lot of living so close to the equator across the continent of Africa. And so in order for us to continue to survive there in that cradle of civilization, we develop melanin through our skin. Our eyes are darkened so that they can filter light better for us, because living in a bright place literally can mean you're going to be squinting a lot, right? When we're talking about nostril size, on the continent, you will find nostril size to be often larger simply because in hotter areas, nostrils help to cool your brain down, period. So any people who have resided and lived in extremely hot environments for thousands and thousands of years may develop wider nostrils, not because of their inferiority, but simply because of the geographical context that they are living in. So when you look at yourself and you look at your body and you look at your own friends and family and you look at the variations among us, realize that this has been a long time in the making. And only in the past 300 to 400 years have we begun to make race. Long before, though, these same physical features have always existed within us. It's also important that when we're talking about race, we do not get mixed up and we don't ignore the fact that race is classed and race is gendered. So while race and your race is really something that's made up, racism is not. Prejudice is not made up. Mistreatment because of what you look like is not made up. That's real. When we are talking, though, about race and racism, we have so many people who have dived into this that we actually have coined a phrase a phrase that was created by a Black woman in 1989 named Kimberly Crenshaw. And the phrase is intersectionality. Because really and truly, your race is not absent of your class and your gender. Yes, we talk about Black people, but the experiences of Black women and Black men are quite different. The same for Asian men and Asian women, Hispanic men and Hispanic women, right? Native men and Native women. Our race has, because it was socially constructed, also taken on traits that are part of our gender and our class. And so because of those things, we cannot ignore it. And we are not able to say that we don't see color or that we simply don't see race. When we're talking scientifically, giving you some census data here, according to the United States Census, the concept of race is completely separate from Hispanic origin. That means that when you're looking at a percentage chart, you shouldn't be combining the percentage of people who are Hispanic within that, because take a look at the list of races that you can choose in this country when you fill out the census. These are the only 6 that you're allowed to choose. So Black or African American, American Indian and Alaska Native, Asian, Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander, white, or you can select that you are 2 or more races. Okay. If you identify as Hispanic or Latino, then it's important that we take a stop here, a pause here, and take in the map. Okay, and if you identify as Hispanic or Latino, can you drop in the chat where you're from? Okay, would you mind taking a moment, shout us out, drop in the chat where you're from. Where is your family from? Where your ancestors originate from that makes you say, I am Hispanic and or Latino? Okay, hola mi gente, I see y'all out there. Detroit, Michigan, Mackenzie. Well, this is, I think, a pause and a place for all of us to really take stock and to understand. Because of the way that we created race and the races in the United States of America, because of the way that we created race and races in that list of 6 in this United States, what we did was actually to erase the voice of so many Hispanic people and Latino people across the world. By taking this one viewpoint of what race is in America, and because America is so very influential over the rest of the world, right? They see our style, they like that. Democracy, we did that. I don't know how we doing on it right now, but we did it, okay? Because they see our style and they like that and it progresses, you've got to understand, that's not the way that race or culture or ethnicity were viewed in these areas or in these other countries. So right now, one of the largest problems that the Hispanic community on an academic level continues to discuss and debate is the words Hispanic and Latino being used interchangeably when they have completely different meanings. You see these words, Hispanic, Latino, in the beginning were a surprise to the people they were describing. Imagine someone walks in and says, oh, the Hispanic guy over there, and you have no idea who the Hispanic guy is because, well, you're Puerto Rican. So who? ¿Quién es? Who's the Hispanic guy in the room? What these words actually mean or define is either the language you speak or the region or country that you're coming from. So let's get a couple of things clear, right? Okay, other side of the island. I see y'all Hispaniola representing Hispaniola out here. Okay. When it comes to Hispanic, we're talking about people who come from a Spanish-speaking country. So guess what? Spain, all the way over in Europe on the other side of the globe, those people in Spain are Hispanic. By definition, in their country, they speak Spanish only. Hispanic, though, not Latino. A person from Spain would not tell you that they're Latino because Latino refers to the actual country where your parents originated from. So you identify possibly as both, but you may not. And that's something I think we should all understand within it. How we erase this and how we imposed upon Hispanic and Latino people an identity that actually has led to many Latino people being forced to choose their own race. So take a look at this data graphic, which is a breakdown of the races of Latin America. Notice that the races that are listed here are 7 and are quite different from the races that we see listed on our United States Census. Because race is simply based off of your physical features, we are literally as a country asking Latino and Hispanic people to simply hold up their arm and tell me how dark you think you are, or tell me, is your hair more to the Black side or to the white side? Right? And so we put this undue announcement of you must choose a race on people who are not raised and culturally who do not share that same viewpoint that you have to choose. If anyone is Hispanic or Latina, feel free to share. And Awati asked the question, does that mean all Latinas are Hispanic, but not all Hispanics are Latina? Good question. Well, I'll tell you this, Awati. In Brazil, people in Brazil are Latino, but they are not Hispanic because they speak Portuguese there. So we have this, again, this disconnect, your language, Hispanic, literally a history of Spanish speaking. We were colonized at some point by the Spaniards, whereas Latino simply represents that map that you saw earlier, the region of those countries in the Caribbean and South America, and which accurately is included in this list here. Indigenous people also get their voices wiped clean when we begin talking about race. And one of the ways that we unfortunately do that is by through our educational systems. You see, our educational school systems intentionally created methods to erase the voices of Native people across history. And so we trivialized the great nations that existed. And then literally from that place, right, began to trivialize and go from calling them nations to tribes. How could a tribe take up an entire 3 states across a country? These were not little pocketed groups of people living in teepees. These were people who had created a cross-country trade and communication system that entirely thrived on this land thousands of years before Christopher Columbus even arrived here. It's often also noted that folks who may have visited here before Christopher Columbus probably came from Africa, which means that Native people and Africans of ancient times likely met, saw each other, communicated, traded, and then happily went back to their homes rather than choosing the approach of colonialism. Really, that occurred when Europeans began wanting to expand. So this concept that it wasn't until Columbus that we discovered America erases so much that I just wanted to make sure that folks had a chance to process. And if there are any Native folks or folks with Native lineage, please drop it in the chat. Drop your nation in the chat if you happen to know your Native ancestry, or if you think your parents have mentioned it, because again, this is where it occurs. In the end, racism isn't something that we're just going to sweep away. And you've got to link it to these serious and very measured places where people are being made to feel inferior. Because we create this dichotomy between Hispanic and Latino, it strives and it pushes into that community this idea that they must either choose one side or the other when it comes to racism, that they must participate in something that looks very different for them. So these concepts are things that, again, accept that we may not give you sealed up, beautiful answers for this, but we are going to offer you a chance to just learn a little today and maybe do some diving and some exploring into your world tomorrow. Here's what I want to give you guys a chance to reflect on for a bit. It's what we call critical race theory. In the meantime, I want to highlight some of the conversation that's popping in the chat because it's popping. Okay. Good. Zoya identified that when it comes to Haiti and the Dominican Republic, you're absolutely right. It erases what would be the Latino culture from Haitian Americans. And it's interesting because then they, while they're not Spanish speaking, right? Again, an example, Haiti, not a Spanish speaking country, but is in Latin America. Good, Brittany, absolutely, right? The idea that Native folks will need to assimilate, that they're going to need to actually wipe these people out, and the only way that we're going to thrive is by wiping them out. Absolutely. Haha. I have a special place in my heart for Haiti because a lot of people may not realize, but Haiti is the country that ended slavery first. They paved the way for the United States to actually even end slavery. Without the Haitian Revolution, we may still have been in chains. And that is a God's honest fact. So give a Haitian person a high five today, because at the end of the day, their courage to rebel against the French in 1804 costed France so much and paved the way for every single African and person of African descent living in the United States. If you think we didn't hear back in 1804, Haiti got free, and we spent the next 60 years doing the same thing and liberating within the United States.
Jerry, can I add something?
Throw it out there.
So one of the things I learned recently too with Haiti is because they gained their independence first, and this happened a lot, so they were completely like a black like navigated country, right? So a lot of like white, I guess, powers like didn't want to trade with them, and like they really put them in like a very bad like economic situation. And also, like, if you know a lot or anything about like the anti-blackness in DR and why Dominicans like want to push, like, if you've ever seen that video of like, I know black, I'm Dominican, that, so it comes from Dominicans saw how Haiti was being treated because they identified as black and governed themselves as the first like black nation to work on like by themselves. And DR said, oh, that's crazy, I'm not trying to be like that. So they tried to push themselves so far away from that identity. So a lot of the like stuff that like stuff happens to Haiti, like people like, it's a tribute, literally they'll have a heart attack if you call them black, like it's because of that. It's like it's disgusting. It's crazy. Like
it is, but it's rooted in that racism, right?
Exactly,
it is.
Exactly.
It's rooted in someone else coming in and saying this isn't right. You guys must be inferior. Yeah, I love it. I love this conversation.
Something, so.
Yeah, please do.
To add on to what Zoya said, that is right, but also there was a dictator who also emphasized that and emphasized being discriminatory towards being black. Like he made like a whole massacre towards Asians just because they were darker than us. And the only way that they identified who was Asian or not, it was by one simple word, which I think was perejil. If you can pronounce it,
perejil, yeah.
It was Haitian and they will kill you. And this was all of the racism that he put into the country and all of the ideas that he brought was then taught to all of the kids. And that was then built up towards the years.
It's no mistake also that Haiti and Cuba are merely 1 to 200 miles off the coast of the United States. The influence of the United States and what we did with racism here is a direct result of how most of Latin America has struggled through these concepts.
And on
Again,
top of
they
that,
just not mixing, but keep it going.
a lot of the Spanish viewed race in a way that a lot of like the white people that came to America didn't. So the white people in America that like colonized and stuff, they wanted to keep different races separate, whereas like in like the Spanish were like, if we mix with them we can make them disappear over time. And that's what makes the addressing, you know, race issues in Latin American countries. Mexico did not like put Black on the census until 2015. So it's literally like you get to act like these things aren't happening because it's like this is in their heads now, like the mixing, like, oh, we're mixed, we're all mixed, we're all mixed. But like, no, some of us are very unambiguously not, right? Native people in Mexico like were consistently pushed off their land. It's very similar, like history repeats itself, but because of like the makeup and like the relationship that was forced upon everybody in those countries, it's really way more difficult to plead the case, right? Like in America, it's like, bro, I see it, right? Like we're all different, so we can kind of like talk about those differences because it's obvious. Whereas like in Latin American countries, like it's very much like, no, we're all mixed. What do you mean? So it makes people able to plead the fifth and not get anything done.
These conversations are part of a conversation that's huge. And so it is noon, and I'm going to make sure that we wrap up with the following. When we're wanting to talk about race and starting to pour it into education, there is a topic of critical race theory, which is an attempt to shift. And so I want to make sure that we understand what it is and offer you the chance to possibly explore. Critical race theory shifts the mindset from if race matters to how race matters. It is indisputable that race is always in play. We can never say race is irrelevant here. Black president or no, right? We can never say that race is completely irrelevant. And so because we understand this and because we know this, then we as a people and as educated people heading to college have a responsibility to focus on disrupting, exposing, challenging, and changing every racist policy that you come in contact with. Okay? You should never, ever be confused about where you need to stand on the topic of race. Because in the end, if you choose to remain silent in the face of any injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. So in this conversation, there is no neutrality. There cannot be. I want to leave you guys, again, not with those raw feelings of, oh my God, gut punch, but want to make you, right, end off with a couple of questions that you should consider. Not that we'll address, but are taboo topics ever coming up in your classrooms? Are you hearing things that make you question your teacher's acceptance of your race and culture? What are some things that you maybe need to be keeping in mind when you're having or addressing some of these uncomfortable conversations? And in that space, I would love for you guys to continue generating thoughts on this. And what I think we can do is probably make sure that we touch these things again when we're in person together. All right. I don't want to keep us any longer. Folks have places to go, people to see. But let this conversation continue to flood your minds when you get into office hours. You don't have to stop the talk. You don't have to stop it via text. Okay, continue the chatter and we'll continue the chatter. Thank you guys so very much. And thank you for letting me run past 12 o'clock. Love you guys. Have a great day. Weird Kids Unite, Prosper. I don't know what that means, but I bet it means something.
It means bye.
Hey, you know what I'm saying? I knew ni hao. I had no idea. Would you pronounce it for me, Peter? So I'm saying the right inflections.
It's 再见.
Sai Tien.
Yep.
Got it. All right. Have a great one, everybody.
Have a great rest of your day.